Oh, there we go. And I see we're being live streamed now, Mr. Chair. So we're good to go.
Okay, and we have confirmation of a quorum. It's just after 1. So welcome everybody to Board of Directors meeting of Thursday, April 21st. I do want to read the First Nations acknowledgement. We would like to acknowledge that many Indigenous nations have long-standing relationships, both historic and modern, with the territories upon which we are located. Today, this area is home to many Indigenous peoples from across Turtle Island. We acknowledge that our watershed forms a part of the treaty and traditional territory of the southeastern Anishinaabe. It is on these ancestral and treaty lands that we live and work. To honor this legacy, we commit to being stewards of the natural environment and undertake to have a relationship of respect with our treaty partners. We are going to put up a First Nations teaching. We thought it was appropriate. Tomorrow's Earth Day, so connecting this to the earth. So I'm not going to read it to you. I'll just leave it there for a minute and let everyone reflect on that, and then we'll get going. Okay, I think that's awesome. Thank you. Thank you for that. Happy Earth Day, everybody, tomorrow. I need item 2, a motion for the adoption of the agenda, please. Director Hooper, second by Director Windover. Anyone object to adopting the agenda? Okay, we'll consider that passed. Thank you. Any declaration of pecuniary interest in anything on today's agenda? Seeing none. Approval of the minutes from our last board meeting. Can I get a mover and a seconder? Councillor Dunn, Director Dunn, thank you. Second by Director Smith. Anyone opposed to those minutes? Adopting those minutes? Okay, we'll consider that passed as well. Thank you. There's no business arising from the minutes. We have no deputations today. We'll move right into presentations and applicable action items. 7.1 is the 2021 audited financial statements. I think we've got an overview in front of us, so I'll turn it over. I don't know if Jonathan's going to lead us off, or you, Mark, or Mr. Shennett, but I will leave it to whoever. Take us away.
Yep. Great. I'll start out, Mr. Chair, and just welcome Tyson Shennett to the meeting here. Tyson is actually Peter Shennett's relative, his son. So it's good to see he's taken up the business. He is our auditor for 2021, and you can see him there. So he represents the firm Peter Shennett Professional Corporation, and we're pleased to work with Tyson in the audited financial statements 2021, which he's prepared and gone through the audit process. So there may be some questions as we move through for Tyson, who's going to run us through the audited financial statement. That was forwarded to everyone this morning, and we can do a screen share as well for the report, just so everyone follows along. This also dovetails with the report that the board of directors received last month for the unaudited financial statements at year end. So there's a few changes which I'm sure will be highlighted as we go through.
Hello, everybody. My name is Tyson Shennett, and thank you, Mark, for that introduction. And so, yes, I am the auditor of the Kawartha Region Conservation Authority, and as such, our job is basically to go through and perform a series of tests and procedures on the financial statements as prepared by management. The purpose of those tests is to gain reasonable assurance that these statements fairly present in all material aspects the financial position of the Conservation Authority as at December 31st. And so while those tests and procedures don't guarantee that there still couldn't be mistakes, they're basically, the intent is to reduce that risk down to a low level so that we can rely upon these statements. And so we conducted our audit again this year in accordance with those auditing standards. And overall, our report, in a lot more words than that, says that we do think that the accompanying financial statements present fairly the financial position of the authority. So basically that's a clean audit opinion, and that we did not find anything to bring to the board's attention that was a matter of concern. So now we'll quickly kind of go through the financial statements. As it was mentioned previously, these are very similar to the internal reported statements that you were presented about a month ago now. Most of the changes are minor, with a few kind of different things just of revenue and expenses kind of being minor items added and taken away kind of at the end of the year, just as kind of things come in not always kind of right on time. So kind of basically no major changes to the numbers, some changes to presentation, and in both kind of a bit more detail and a bit less detail. So normally we start off on the statement of operations, page 3. Sorry, yes, thank you, John. Sorry, I guess page 3 is probably page 6 or so on the PDF. And so the kind of overall theme of this year really seems to have been kind of a bit of a return to normal. I know that's kind of comparing a lot of the figures to 2020 was kind of 2020 was a very different year. I know 2021 wasn't entirely back to normal, but certainly it was. 2020 was, yeah, there was kind of basically the staffing out was kind of when COVID began. And so a lot of projects and revenues were really impacted in 2020, and kind of going into 2021 here, you can kind of see how it is much more back to normal than it was previously. Particularly, I guess, to me, the more notable items were planning and regulation being up significantly, mainly driven by demand, and kind of stewardship and conservation lands. A lot of the projects and work kind of returning back to a level that it wasn't able to be at in the prior year. Likewise, if you kind of look down below in the expense section, much of the expenses follow this same project, with the main item of note to be being the special and general benefiting projects, where a lot of these projects now were kind of back in progress, where I know last year a lot of things were more so delayed, kind of outside of everyone's control, and kind of this year was an ability to kind of get back to work on a lot of those things. I know some of the numbers were a bit below budget. I know there sometimes was trouble always kind of managing to find staff and get everything fully back up to speed, but certainly it represented a huge increase from 2020. And so then you can see kind of your excess revenue over expenditures for the year before other item was $310,566, which was an increase of around $90,000 from the prior year of $222,000. You can see below that there was another item that happened during the year. It was the donation of some of the lands to the Coarseline Trust, which I'm sure you're all aware of. And basically, we've kind of changed the presentation here to pull that out separately, as it doesn't kind of really reflect the normal operations of the Conservation Authority, that it was kind of a weird and different item that didn't really directly affect the cash or ongoing business of the authority. It was more kind of this one-off thing where some of the land I know that you were holding was deemed to be better served by being held by a different organization kind of dedicated to kind of the same purposes as you were. And so to me, it was kind of important to kind of separately show that, just as it doesn't really kind of impact this year. Sorry, as you'll see kind of on the next page, it does make a difference, but it doesn't kind of make a difference in your kind of normal operations. So that's kind of why we've separated it out there. And so then you can see the excess revenues over expenditures for the year after that item was $145,921, which was less than last year, which was the same as before the other item. If we switch then to page 2, this is our statement of changes in net assets. And so basically, it's kind of split into 3 different parts here. And so the first 3 items are items that are under the control of the Conservation Authority. There's the unrestricted net assets, the Capital Asset Acquisition Fund, and the Conservation Initiatives Fund. And those ones are under the control of the Conservation Authority. We have kind of allocated the income as in past practice, with unspecified donations going to conservation initiatives, capital assets being partly an allocation based on the cost of the assets during the year, and the kind of service fee out to each project and department to cover that. as well as a bit of an additional allocation to cover expected replacement costs for some of the aging vehicles coming up here in the future. And then with the kind of rest of the balance in the unrestricted net assets that can be used for any purpose that the Conservation Authority deems fitting with its purpose. And so those items are kind of the bulk of your items. And below that, you can kind of see the externally restricted items. These are items that are actually not under the direct control of the Conservation Authority, because these funds were restricted by an external funding source for a specific purpose. And sometimes I know that restricting source is also one of your main funders, like the Durham East Cross Forest. And so there is some ability for you to direct that in the future, but essentially it means these can't be used at the discretion of the Conservation Authority except for their stated purpose. There wasn't a huge amount of difference in there for the year. The main difference being in the Skoogop Land Acquisitions Fund, where another piece of land was acquired and there was a bit of funding to help with that acquisition. So that was kind of the main change down there in the externally restricted funds. And then kind of below that, you can see the capital restricted fund. And this just represents the money that is tied up in tangible capital assets. So basically this means this is assets that belong to the corporation, but they're ones that are kind of completely restricted because they're tied up in buildings and vehicles and land and things like that. And so while they do belong to the corporation and represent some of your assets, they aren't assets that can really be readily accessed. And that's where the land donation came out of during the year. That basically that was kind of previously that was sitting there as part of your capital assets in the land account. And basically now it was kind of removed from that going forward. Likewise, then, if we flip to the first page, the statement of financial position. This represents basically where your financial assets and liabilities, as well as your non-financial assets and liabilities, were at the end of the year. As you can see, the cash balance was up, while the receivables balance was more or less in line with prior years. Accounts payable was up slightly, while kind of the other source water protection was deferred revenue, as long as the kind of other types of deferred revenue and deferred planning and regulation. To me, the kind of notable thing there is basically that they're not increasing significantly, meaning that we kind of, the authority is getting through some of those projects. That basically, as you could see kind of before, planning and regulation fees were up, but it's not leading to a significant chunk of backlog of deferred planning and regulations sitting there unprocessed, that they are being processed in a somewhat timely manner and not increasing it. And some of the older projects I know that were kind of sitting there from, I know some of them were sitting there from 2018 actually did show some work on them to get them through, as I know sometimes it's waiting on them to actually proceed on the project, as well as the Conservation Authority is just holding on to the money until they tell them to proceed as well. So I know there was a couple of the older ones that we did make some progress on this year, but as well, I think the important thing is it shows that this money isn't building up here unused, that it is kind of being used throughout the year. Likewise, you can kind of see tangible capital assets, less the deferred capital contributions, which are basically just the funding to help pay for the depreciation of those assets. And then below, there's kind of prepaid expenses, which are just usually licenses and small amounts of inventory items that are to be used in the coming year for the organization. But to me, there wasn't anything particular here that I think needed any special attention called to it. That is, to me, most of the highlights of your financial statements. Yeah, does anyone have any questions or concerns?
Okay, thank you for that. There we go. Does anybody have any questions regarding the 2021 statements while we have Mr. Shennett? There you go. Director Hooper, go ahead.
Make sure I got my mic on. It's really, it's in regards to some of the notes. So can I ask the question now, or would I wait till
No, go ahead. Normally we don't cover all the notes in detail, but I am happy to answer any questions on.
Okay, it's just that, and it's probably something simple, but I tried to find note number 9 where it says contingent liabilities. And it's in regards to I guess it's an ongoing lawsuit. Is there a figure attached to that? Do we have a monetary number? I don't know whether to direct that to you or whether to direct that to Ms. Stevens.
We do have a number attached to that was specifically accrued in the statements, but in discussions with management, we thought, and reviewing the relevant standards, we believe it's not appropriate to publicly say what that number is, because it might affect the legal defense, essentially.
Okay.
So I'm not opposed to it being shared with the board at some point, but it should be hopefully in a session that is closed.
Perfect. Thank you very much for that explanation. I appreciate it. Thanks, Mr. Chair.
Sorry, and I guess related to that, these are draft statements. We do ultimately, you have to approve them. And we also wait then on the letter from the lawyer saying that there is no other lawsuits that we weren't informed of.
Right. Okay, thank you.
Yeah, here's hoping. I think we're good there. Any other questions for Mr. Shennett while we have him here on the statements? Okay, are you finished, Tyson? Are you done with, or have you got more to go over?
I have nothing else unless you have any more questions.
Okay, I think we're good here. So I just need a motion to receive the presentation then, please. No, I need the motion just for the presentation first, and then we'll get to the report. So, sorry, I can't see. Okay, Vice Chair Scott and Director Dunn to receive the presentation. Anyone opposed? That's passed. And then we have, I did ask for a revision to the motion. If we can pull that motion up now, thank you. Sorry about that. This is for the report. So resolve that the 2021 draft financial statements as audited. I'll let you guys read it. You don't need me to ramble on. The previous motion suggested that the reserves be allocated as presented in the financial statement. And I thought it's more transparent if we actually put it in the motion. So we show sort of everybody where, without referring to the financials, where the reserves are being allocated. So that's the motion that we're suggesting go forward for the statements, if everybody's okay with that. Any concerns with doing it that way? Thank you. Okay, can I get a mover and a seconder for those? Director Hooper, seconded by Director Seymour Fagan. Thank you. Is anyone opposed to that motion? Okay, we'll consider that passed then. Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Shennett. And I do want to say thank you, Jonathan and Wanda. I know there was a lot of, you guys obviously did a lot of work to get those ready in preparation. So much appreciated, everybody, for pulling that together. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Okay. So we'll move down to our staff reports. Item 8.1 is permits issued by staff. I'm not sure there's a whole lot to go over with here. We got 100%. Ashley doing a great job filling in there on the permits or plowing through those permits. So is there any questions on that permit report? Certainly no complaints. Can I get a motion then that the section 28 permits issued by staff be received? Permits 2022-048, 2022-082 through 2022-01. 112 to 2022-114 through 2022-116. Revised permits 2022-078, and that the permitting performance report be received, please. Vice Chair Scott, thank you.
I won't even ask you to repeat all that motion with all those numbers.
I appreciate that. Thank you. And Director Wendover, you'll second that. Thank you. Anyone opposed to receiving that report? Any questions on that report? Okay, that's passed. Thank you. Strategic action update. First quarter, I'll turn it over to Mark. I know all staff are involved, but I'll turn it over to you, Mark. Go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So this report here represents the first quarter of 2022 and summarizes some of the actions that we've done that were summarized in my CIO report of the last couple of meetings. A little bit more detail as well that you'll see in there. Essentially, there's been a lot of work that's going on to prepare for the upcoming season. We've worked on the Lake Dalrymple lake management plan, held a working group meeting, did some repairs on some equipment that were, I believe the wires were chewed through by a beaver. So you never know what we get to see out in the field, but we work to try and resolve them. You saw a lot of work related to the Source Protection Committee already, and a little bit of a highlight in terms of our flood forecasting is that there's 2 new water level monitoring gauges in the watershed, and that was done with the Federal Water Survey of Canada agency that's under Environment Climate Change. And so there's one on Lake Scugog at the Scugog Island Marina, and also one in Fenelon Falls for Sturgeon Lake. So those are great additions to the network. The spring freshet is pretty much done. We're not expecting any future major developments either in the watershed, which is all done, or from the Golenburnt rivers. So that's good news for everyone on that front. And in terms of some of the other work that we're doing, some of the capital or special project work on the Lake Scugog Enhancement Project, we're progressing with looking at addressing some of the permit requirements still from the federal government. So our staff are working diligently to that end, and also addressing some of the fish habitat offsetting. And there's some good support for those activities. Our stewardship department's been going full bore as well. So a lot of preparations for the spring planting season, and getting projects all underway for 2022 for a number of projects. Water Fund is open as well up until the end of May, and we've received some pretty good feedback on or uptake on those applications to date. We're also updating our climate change strategy, which you'll see presented before you in a couple of meetings time, and that really is to update our climate change strategy from an earlier rendition, see how we're progressing with that, and also update the content. And there's been a lot of additional work that we've been doing in terms of revising some of our programs on the education front. It was certainly one of those challenging program areas during the pandemic, and we just didn't have resources to really adapt using existing staff. So we've pivoted to external education sources. So you see that we've got a new summer camp partnership with At Last for School, which is great, and they offer a full suite of summer camps and March break camps and things of that nature. So we're really looking forward to this as we move forward. And we also partnered with a couple of businesses as well to provide some education opportunities for our general membership or public at large. So that's great. And you see there's also a Pinois relationship that's been struck, and that's for a March break camp, and we're actually looking forward to some future kind of partnerships with them as well. So something you can look forward to. We've been doing, I'm pretty proud of the work that we've been doing related to our First Nations partners, and thanks to board support on that as well. So we've been, one of those things that you think we should have been doing intuitively, but we are doing now is actually forwarding our flood forecasting messaging to First Nations directly. And we do have, we've been working with the First Nations in Scugog Island to host an Indigenous summer position as well. So this would give exposure to their youth, Indigenous youth, in terms of environmental work that we do. So pretty exciting work, and the Pinois group is also First Nations oriented. So that is the summer or the March break camp, and we're looking forward, as I mentioned, to a couple of additional partnerships with them. We've been working with our academia as well on a number of fronts, both in terms of providing some, if you want to call them guest lectures, but also supporting a number of the projects that we have underway, which are outlined in the report. And I think at that point, the only other thing I'll mention is that pretty excited about open data and sharing our information to public at large, because I think that's an important part of our business, and no sense it being hidden behind reports and things of that nature that you can't really work with easily. So providing that in an open format makes sense for everyone, I think. And you never know where the data will be used, but we're seeing an increased interest in the data that we have, and that certainly furthers a lot of objectives that we as an organization have, or that might dovetail nicely with it. So, so with that, that's my report on the quarterly report. Thank you.
Thanks, Mark. Any questions on that update, strategic actions update from Mark? Vice Chair McFadden, go ahead.
Thank you, Chair. And to Mark, just a comment. I'm always quite impressed by the openness and transparency of your reports and the information and data that you bring forward, and your encouragement to move towards this open data. And this is just more of a comment of something local that's occurred, and it may be of interest to this group to get in touch with them. But Trout Unlimited, and I don't know that they've ever done any presentations before this board, but they did one before our municipal council. It's a volunteer organization, and they have access to equipment, and they actually go out and measure how healthy your watershed is relative to the fish habitat, etc. There was no charge, and they did a complete one for our entire village of Millbrook. And there was a lot of really valuable information that was gleaned from that to help with our local watershed. And it may be an organization you wish to get in touch with. I don't know whether they have operations set up within your watershed, but we certainly learned a lot. And unlike most things, there was no cost to it. It wasn't a hiring of a consultant, and it could certainly add some very valuable. They had water temperatures, where there needed to be improvements, where it was going well, the breeding. I was absolutely blown away by a volunteer organization. So just a suggestion, when you got talking about open data and availability, it could be something to look into.
Great, thank you.
Thank you for that. I'm sure Emma and our monitoring situation will be perking up her ears. So thank you for that. And at no cost, Emma. How do you beat that, eh?
Always good if it's no cost.
Exactly.
Yeah, just reach out to our municipality, Cap Monaghan, and I'm sure our clerk can send you all the information, contact information, and the presentation that they did for our council. And if there's an opportunity, I think it's fabulous. It certainly educated our council, and we were quite impressed.
Thanks for that, Scott. Appreciate
Thank
it.
you.
Yep. Any other questions for Mark on the report or comments? Okay, can I get a motion just to receive that first strategic actions update for the first quarter, please? Director Smith, second by Director Windover. Anyone opposed? Passed. Thank you. Next one, CAO report 8.3. Go ahead, Mark.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'll try not to duplicate any of the items in the quarterly report to the best of my ability. There was a couple of interesting points over the last month, and specifically, there's a lot of behind the scenes work that just you don't see as readily as some of the other accomplishments that we have. So for instance, there's a number of compliance documents that are needed. MFIPA reports, for instance, compliance, and a number of other ones that have been completed. So those are always good to make sure that we're on top of. Finances as well is something that you see the audited financial statement, but all the day-to-day work is certainly ramping up, and so John and Laura's work on that is much appreciated. And Melanie's on the corporate side, being a support for corporate services and doing that, for instance, that MFIPA report. There was a Conservation Ontario meeting that was held on April 11th of this month. So there was a new board that was elected by the membership. So Alan Revel from the Cataraqui is now the chair of Conservation Ontario, and Alan Dale is the vice chair for Conservation Ontario, and he's from the Upper Thames Conservation Authority, Upper Thames River Conservation Authority. So a couple of interesting points there, and I'll highlight something else that's kind of interest that was presented in the meeting relative to calc standards. as well, because I think it is a great highlight. On the COVID front, we are looking at a return date of May 2nd, and that dovetails with a remote working policy. So we will be moving in that direction and inviting our staff back to the office. And as I mentioned, also implementing that remote working policy. It's been more of an adaptation, I guess, up until this point. So this would be more of a formal arrangement for the future. In terms of communications, there's some pretty interesting numbers that John has worked on relative to Google and some of the searches that we're seeing, and a lot of work there. So those are infused within the report, and most notably is that the traffic to our platforms is rapidly increasing as winter kind of wanes and we get spring upon us. So and that is dovetailing nicely with some of the tourism pages that we've developed, and that supports all of our municipal partners and some of the work or tourism that is that our activities integrate with. So that's really great news. We have had our resources planner move on to Toronto Region Conservation Authority, and consequently, we also hired someone from their organization, Colleen Cathcart, who will be our new forester. So things are continually shifting on that front, and as a result, though, that did put a pretty big pressure on our planning department. So we've been working to try and manage that to the best of our ability. Everyone pitching in, which is really appreciated, and so we've also recently secured consultant report. I know I had put in the report that we were securing, but that is currently secured now. So we look forward to working with a couple of firms that were selected as part of a roster approach, and we do have our engineering consulting in place. And then this comes to the part I wanted to highlight specifically, which is this is the first year that statistics have been reported for what is called non-growth CAs. These were voluntary conservation authorities that took part in the reporting of calc timelines, and so I pulled this report and just compared it back to our numbers that were submitted as part of the collective, and you can see that we're doing pretty good in terms of our statistics relative to the average that was presented. So we're 14 points higher on the Conservation Ontario best practice timelines, and those are the timelines that have been reduced by a third over the provincial timelines for permit issuance. So we're doing really, really well on the permitting front. So I just wanted to share the good news on that front. In source water, we have been working with an arrangement with Minden Hills, an agreement for backup RMO services. They're currently without an RMO at present, and so that has been passed by council to be a backup for them. We don't anticipate this to be a lot of work, and certainly is a great way of working with the municipality there on a cost recovery basis. And the other note I'll mention is Ken Reed Conservation Area. The road is a little bit I'll call it rough at present. So we'll wait until the thaw comes out of that. But in case you hear any notes about that, it's kind of the annual season for the rough road in Ken Reed. We have to wait for the thaw to come out, and of course in the meantime there's a lot of potholes that form. But if we grade now, then we just won't get a clear road for much of the season. So in order not to waste the money on grading at this point in time, we do temporary fixes where needed, and then grade it so it lasts for a long time. And I think with that, I think I'll just stop there, Mr. Chair, and be willing to answer any questions you might have.
Thanks, Mark. Any questions besides the disappointment that you have potholes? As none of us do. So any questions for Mark on Vice Chair McFadden? Go ahead.
Thank you, Chair. Be careful on the depth of the potholes. You may have to do a fish habitat study at some point, so just keep them, make sure they don't get too big. I just want to draw attention to, and I know you mentioned it, Mark, with regards to the summary of permitting performance and our performance in 2021. I know you brought attention to it, but you did skim over it quickly. And I think it generally speaks to all of staff and how well they've done. 99.5 and 98% is phenomenal, recognizing all the difficulties that we were working through, especially during COVID. So I wanted to say thank you, because that's those are phenomenal numbers. There's not much room for improvement there, and you should be very proud of it, as well as your staff. So thank you.
Thank you for that.
Thank you very much.
Any other questions for Mark on the update? Can I get a motion, please, to receive the monthly CAO monthly report? Director Hooper, second by Vice Chair McFadden. Anyone opposed? And passed. 8.4 is correspondence. Is there anything you want to highlight in there, Mark?
No, I'll just highlight one piece of correspondence. That's the second one, and that is an email from the Ministry of Environment, Conservation and Parks. I believe I also forwarded this to everyone directly, and this is just a notice from the MECP that they plan on holding a workshop to discuss the kind of results of their analysis of all the inventories that were submitted. So they wanted it to be forwarded on to the board. And to any other relevant staff. So I just presented it there for everyone, a bit of an additional highlight as well in the correspondence for you. In case you're interested in registering, then the details are provided for in the correspondence.
Thank you for that. Any questions on the correspondence for Mark? Can I get a motion to receive the correspondence, please? Director Dunn, seconded by Director Windover. Thank you. Anyone opposed? And that's passed. Thank you. Let's just jog down. We do have our source water protection meeting, but not till 2, so we'll just keep going. Action items 10.1 is the RMO appointment. Mark?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chair. This is a backup position for the RMO. We've had Ashley Kleback, who has recently gone through the RMO training. We recognize that we need a bit of a backup for that position for our agreement with City of Kawartha Lakes as the RMI for that area, and so this is what is required according to the Act is a resolution from the board to officially appoint Ashley as an RMO RMI, and that's what this report is for. So that's about it, Mr. Chair. Thank you.
Yep. No, that's good. Any questions for Mark on that? And the motion is resolved that Ashley Kleback be appointed as a risk management official, risk management inspector for the purpose of enforcing the Clean Water Act RSO 2006 Part 4 and the regulations. Is that right? Part 4? Yeah. And I'm rusty on my Roman numerals. And the regulations pursuant to Part 4, and that a certificate of appointment be issued bearing the Chief Administrator Officer's signature. Need a mover and a seconder, please. Moved by Director Smith, second by Director Seymour Fagan. Any questions on that? Comments? Anyone opposed? And that's passed as well. Thank you. And right down to Planning Act changes. 10.2. Go ahead, Mark.
Yep. Thank you, Mr. Chair. This is an item that you'll all be familiar with from municipal councils, and it's related to Bill 109. It's the More Homes for Everyone Act, and so the province is currently in third reading for this. It's out for public consultation through the ERO, and that is it closes on April 29th, so coming up at the end of the month. The purpose of the bill is to increase the housing supply, and that's something that's been noted in a couple of reports that the provincial government has been working on, and a task force as well. So this is really trying to speed up the development process. And of course, whenever implementing new legislation, there's a good opportunity to comment on the legislation, also highlight any areas that might cause some problems or support it in different ways. So this report just provides a bit of a highlight for some of the aspects related to our business that board would be interested in. and so there is a couple of items. There's what the province is calling an incentive to encourage a decision, and essentially what that means is for a couple of different types of applications, if a decision is not made within a certain time frame, then a refund back to the applicant or developer is something that the province sees as reasonable. So that could have an impact on our revenues, depending on how the mechanics work. So that's a pretty important part of our business. About a third of our revenue generated is from planning and permitting. So that is pretty important. There's something, complete application rules for site applications. I think that's a good thing. More clarity is always better for everyone. There are some additional powers given by the minister to make regulations regarding conditions of draft plan site approval. So that might have some potential impacts, but they're not really well defined until the supporting material is produced, the regulation itself. And there is a new process called the Community Infrastructure and Housing Accelerator Order. This would be available to municipalities upon request, and would speed up the process as well for development applications. The comments are provided below, and I think we have a total of 5 kind of high-level comments. So the first comment is really just identifying that natural hazards are an important context for development, and in speeding up development, that should still be an important consideration. And that follows both the legislative as well as the mechanics as it plays out through the development process. And I've tied that into another comment a little bit later, which is a lot of times we implement some comments that really streamline the permitting process as well, which means that everything, when it comes to permitting, it's a much smoother process. So maintaining that level of flexibility in the planning process is important. We see that as important, and speeds up approvals at the tail end as opposed to necessarily the front end. We did mention the support for clarity and accountability to the planning framework in general, and certainty for development, which I think is important to note. There is the interplay between the Minister's zoning tool and the Conservation Authorities Act, and the impact on permitting activities with the new powers that are presented in the Bill 109 are something that's not entirely clear at present. And so that's something else that we see would be benefiting from some clarity. The MZO that is embedded in the Conservation Authorities Act identifies that we have to issue permits if the minister deems it so. So just understanding how the two acts play together and the powers that would be implemented are important from our perspective. And then I did mention the fees already. That was 0.4. And then in establishing powers for draft plan of subdivision, that is really just making sure there's flexibility in the process, which I'm sure municipalities would want as well. But I think in general, identifying types of conditions are useful, and I think we see that in our own Conservation Authorities Act. It provides some clarity, but the importance for flexibility should be there as well. So that's a summary of the report, Mr. Chair. Happy to answer any questions that anyone might have.
Thanks, Mark. Sounds good. Director, Vice Chair McFadden, go ahead.
Thank you, through Chair. Item number 4, I think we may need to revisit is the one statement with we do not have any direct control over the time frame which a municipality provides final approvals. I think to be clear, I think all commenting agencies play a role, because all it takes is one to be delayed to cause a holdup of the entire process. And I've been around long enough. I'm not pointing blame at any particular organization. I think everyone has been the cause at some point. But I think more importantly, moving forward, because we're going to be revisiting MOUs between conservation authorities and whether it's your upper tier, lower tier, or single tier, I think to protect what you're suggesting, Mark, we need to have within that MOU a mechanism in place whereby we're using some sort of a stopwatch so we can clearly articulate that we've met the necessary timelines to hand things off. So therefore, if the amounts are being refunded back, we can say, you know what, we did our role. Like we met our timelines. They're predefined within our MOU as per so when we meet ours, we should be penalized as part of this. And I think ultimately the province doesn't care. They want things going through, but I think it's the micromanaging of the interest fees, because it does represent such a significant component of our revenues, that we need to ensure that if we're doing our job, that we're going to get paid for it. And vice versa. If we're delaying the process, then obviously we'd be the organization that's penalized. But based on your Section 28 permits, you're doing a fantastic job. We shouldn't have much of a revenue loss as long as it's covered off in the MOU. But it brings to the other side. There's so much oversight on the Section 28 permits, and we see them at each meeting. But in the peer review role, when you're reviewing the planning application, that information doesn't come back to the board for us to see how we're doing. And so there's that component, but it's that lack of openness and transparency and the overall delays that the province is trying to address. I think we'd be best to have that, ensure that that's added into our MOU with any municipalities that we're going to work with.
Go ahead, Mark, you want to respond?
I agree with our vice chair's comment about a stopwatch. I think that's very, very relevant. Being able to start and stop the process in accordance with the information that's submitted, that really is important. So the time to respond sometimes takes a while. We did actually produce reports for the board on the permitting side, where the response times you could see visually how long it took compared to our responses, and that is an important factor for sure. So totally agree with that, and I agree with the whole aspect of timing. So I know for some applications we get a turnaround time of 2 days to 3 days for some applications, which is a bit tight for us. But I understand that there's a bigger process, so navigating that is pretty important for sure. And how that all plays together, I think that's the big challenge.
Yeah, those are great comments, Scott. Thank you. And go ahead if you want to add something. Go ahead.
Yeah, I think the takeaway, Mark, speaking from the Conservation Authority's perspective, let's make sure we have all this in our MOUs with the municipalities. They're going to have to all be rewritten, and this is critical. If we're doing our job and we're getting our information returned, if somebody along the chain doesn't meet the timelines, that's not our fault. And so we should be paid for that, and somebody else should be the one that bears the brunt of the financial implications as a result. So I think that's where we can protect ourselves, and I think it's fantastic, because ultimately we're going to find out who's holding up the process. And when it comes back repetitively that it's not the CA, that's good information, and that's information that we should be bringing forward, I would think, to demonstrate, much like your Section 28, that hey, look, we're not the problem here.
Yeah, but I think that's going to apply to all municipalities as well. I mean, this was a big concern at Conservation Ontario too, right? I mean, when you look at municipalities and we put out, so we're supposed to, they're getting a ton of pushback on this. So I wouldn't be surprised if they soften it a little bit. I mean, if we're waiting for comments from MTO and we don't get them for 2 months, and then we're not hitting a timeline, we're supposed to refund it because of a new provincial policy. I mean, a couple of options: we could double the fees and then give them half their fees back if they want, or municipalities are talking about not charging anything, and then there's nothing to refund. So, at some point it's like, we're all trying to do the same thing here and accomplish the same thing. But some of these ideas I think are moving in the right direction, but some of them are just, I think they're tinkering in the wrong, we all want the same thing: faster development, faster processes, but there's a way to do it, and there's a way to tick people off, excuse my English, but you're right. So much of it is beyond our control, that not only from a Conservation Authority perspective, but from a municipal perspective, yes, we need to push and do a better job. We all do. But a lot of those comments, they take time to get back, and you start putting a stopwatch or a gun to them. And I think we're just going to create some issues. So we'll see what happens. Yeah. But I wouldn't be surprised if that one gets softened up a bit.
I might have to respectfully disagree. I think they're going to follow through on it. That's why I'm really concerned that we need to protect ourselves. I've seen it amongst all the commenting agencies, and I know you mentioned MTO upon waiting. I've very recently had to deal with MTO, and I did raise it to the appropriate level. And in the end, we were able to ignore all their comments because, quite frankly, they didn't meet the deadlines. So I think it's really important that the same playing field is applied to all commenting agencies, whether they're provincial body or municipal body, because ultimately, if we're all on the same page trying to do the same thing, then everybody has to play by the same rules, and we can't be held up by one commenting agency or whoever it is, even if it's a provincial body. So yeah, we're on the same page. I think the goal here is just to make sure the Conservation Authority is protected from the revenue source.
Sounds good. Do we want to add MOU comments to the comments before we send them in, Mark? Is that, does anybody, I think those are good comments to make sure they're part of an MOU with the municipality. So we're all, everything's in front of us. I mean, that makes perfect sense. So unless anybody has any objections to that, can we add that to that comment section? Okay. You good with that, Mark?
Yep. Yeah. I'll.
Right.
Yeah. Definitely. I'll add that in, and the stopwatch and the MOUs into the comment. Yep.
Perfect. Thanks for that, Scott. Any
Very
other
good.
questions or comments on that update? Director Smith, go ahead.
Yeah, thank you, Chair Latham. First of all, I agree completely with the Vice Chair. I think he's brought up a lot of good points and made them better than I was going to. But I just wondered, just on this, Mark, does this? I know our results, our return of our comments and that on permits have been exceptionally good. But to meet these deadlines, do you anticipate that we will have to hire any more staff, or currently you're doing great, but I guess it all depends on the volume of applications that come in, but is there any impact on staffing, do you believe?
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Mr. Smith. Thank you, Mr. Smith. Yes, I think that is one of the uncertainties that we see in here. Is certainly whenever you add timeframes, I think the stopwatch concept really helps. If that wasn't there, then there'd certainly be additional pressure. And one of those would be the situation that we find ourselves in right now, which is when you're short on the resources, how do you adapt and how quickly can you adapt? So we would be, for instance, at this point in time, in danger of probably a couple of these in terms of the timelines presented, especially if it's in the 2 to 3 day time frame. We would be stretching ourselves pretty thin, and we are stretching ourselves thin right now. So it's still an obligation, duty that we have to comment, but we'd certainly find ourselves in that situation, which is not great. So flexibility, especially for small organizations like ours, is pretty important, where you have one resource planner addressing all the comments, right? So totally agree that that is a concern, and if there is support from the province to augment that in some sort of fashion, that's always welcome.
Thank you. I just wondered, you mentioned the 2 to 3 day timeline. What would be an example of that, and when would that be expected?
Yeah, those are typically the smaller ones. Minor variances are the ones that come to mind, but they still have to go through a review of all the pieces, and some of those can be troublesome as well, and some may require some engineering reviews, which of course, once you're into that, you're over the 3 day mark pretty easily.
Yeah, I'm not sure that I would consider an expectation of 2 to 3 day timeline very reasonable, but hopefully that doesn't happen very often.
Yeah. It's pretty consistent with minor variances, to be honest. But for some of these, I think ZBAs, OPAs, and site plans are the ones that are identified. So it's still a pretty tight time frame to get those done, unless you have the stopwatch kind of concept that's worked out. And of course, that means that your infrastructure internally also has to match that. So that you're able to start and stop the watch. We don't have a stop and start currently in our calc timeframes, for instance. So that would have to be worked into the actual programming behind your tracking system.
All right, thank you.
Thank you. Any other questions? Okay, we have a motion that resolve that staff report on the proposed Planning Act changes pursuant to the More Homes for Everyone Act 2022 be received. And comments, why don't we say as provided and amended in the report be submitted to the Environmental Registry of Ontario, ERO number 019-5284. Everybody's okay with that? Vice Chair McFadden, will you move that? Thank you. Seconded by Director Windover. Any comments, questions? Anyone opposed? Okay.
One final comment I forgot to mention, I just put it in the chat just so you saw it. I believe it's already had third reading, but it is still open for comment.
Yeah, we got our usual 3 days to comment. Or whatever, you're moving fast. There's an election coming, would you? Who would have thought?
There must be. There must be.
Yeah. Anyone opposed?
For clarification, that was at the writing of the report. It was still in process. So,
anyone opposed to that motion? Good. We'll consider it passed. Thank you. So let's recess now. We've got a few things under new business and a closed session to deal with. So let's recess now for our source water protection. We got 5 minutes, so just stay on this link if you're here, and we'll come back at 2 o'clock and we'll do our source water protection, and then we'll go back and finish off our board meeting. Thanks, folks. See you in 5 minutes.
Hello. Hello.
hello, how are you, Pam?
I'm good. How are you?
Yeah, very good, thanks.
Great.
Keeping well?
I am. That's a knock on wood these days, right?
Oh yeah, well, yeah, got to keep yourself healthy, and yeah, we're going through a bit of a wave, I guess, right now. I know I got COVID a few weeks ago now, so I think maybe 3 weeks, but yeah, one of those things, family event, right? And go there. No one was wearing a mask. They were actually pulling masks off our faces, right? It was like,
it was a game,
you know,
was it?
So, I guess so.
Oh,
Yeah.
no.
So yeah. Anyway, someone there had COVID, so kind of spread around. I think we heard, you know, maybe 6 different families ended up getting it. So
Yes, well, Mark, a good recovery, it looks like.
yeah, it was mild, which was good, but you know, same sort of thing, some nausea, fever, chills, you know, but it was different for everyone that got it. So yeah, pretty wild, but yeah, over it now, which is good. So so that's always good. You don't want to go more serious. So
well, I'm glad that it worked out, that you just got through it. I'm hearing that it doesn't seem to matter how bad it is, vaccine or not.
yeah,
some people are hit hard,
yeah.
some aren't, and it doesn't seem to correspond with being vaccinated. It's odd.
Yeah, the vaccination, it's not like a screen that you get in front of you or anything. It's really just a matter of, you know, it's a matter of your immune system working for you a little better, right? So
Yes.
you're just, yeah. So I mean, that's really about it. We have friends in the UK, and their daughter got it twice within 2 months, kind of thing. So yeah, so
Wow,
it's
twice.
yeah. So it's not a it's not a cure all, but certainly it helps with the immunity, which is good. So
Well, if green jelly beans work, I'm on board, but yeah, we just don't know, right?
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, absolutely. There you go. I see Jenna's in here now too, so that's always a good thing. 'Cause she is the information source for source water.
We wouldn't have much of a meeting without Jen, I'm afraid.
Nope.
That's
Okay, so it's 2:00. So as we got our friends from Halliburton, welcome. Our source water protection meeting. We will call the meeting to order. Kawartha Halliburton Source Protection Authority meeting Thursday, April 21st. There is adoption of the agenda, please. A motion for the adoption of the agenda is what we're looking for. By Director Smith, second by Director Seymour Fagan. Anyone opposed to that? That's passed. Declaration of pecuniary interest. Today's agenda. Seeing none. Can I get a mover and a seconder for the approval of the minutes from March 24th, 2022, last month? Director Hooper, seconded by Director Kennedy. Thank you. Anyone opposed to the minutes? Any questions, concerns? Nope, that's passed. We had no business arising from the minutes. We'll go right into item 5, which is an update on the Trent Source Protection Committee activities. Jenna, take it away.
Thank you. So through you, Mr. Chair, since our last Source Protection Authority Board of Directors meeting held on March 24th of 2022, we had a Source Protection Committee meeting on March 31st of 2022. So this report should be pretty short and sweet and just a quick summary of what was gone over at that meeting. To start, Jim Hunt, the chair of the Source Protection Committee, provided an update on the activities that have happened in our region and across the province since the last Source Protection Committee meeting. In his report, he had summarized the recent program updates and activities that have been occurring across the province. He also summarized a letter that was sent on behalf of the chairs and project managers of the Eastern Ontario region, which actually received some correspondence back from the director of the Ministry of the director of the Conservation and Source Protection branch of the Ministry of the Environment, Conservation and Parks. This letter was regarding non-municipal drinking water systems and the need for new chairs and project managers workshops. They had spoken about revamping the Ontario Drinking Water Stewardship Program, potential drinking water concerns for new affordable housing or communal housing projects, and updating science in the assessment reports in the next round of the Section 36 amendment processes. The main driver for the Source Protection Committee meeting was the approval of the annual progress reports. So our project coordinator, Keith Taylor, who works out of Lower Trent Conservation's office, provided a high-level summary of the Trent annual progress report, which is actually our second agenda item on this board agenda package. So we can go over it in more detail at that time. He presented it to the committee, and it's a summary of our Kawartha Halliburton Source Protection Authority, Otonabee Peterborough Source Protection Authority, Crow Valley Source Protection Authority, and Lower Trent Source Protection Authority annual reports. The municipal approval authorities, septic inspections, risk management plans, and education and outreach all received scores of P, progressing well and on target, which led to an overall progress score of progressing well and on target for the Trent region. A second annual progress report was presented to the Source Protection Committee, which addressed the Ganaraska Source Protection Area as they have their own source protection plan. And similar to the Trent plan, they also received an overall score of progressing well and on target, with all of the bodies laid out in that report also receiving a grade of progressing well and on target. The leads for each source protection authority gave high-level summaries and updates to the Source Protection Committee, which often helps identify challenges or areas in which the committee can help support the leads. These are always very appreciated, and the summaries often include details on annual reporting progress and how the process went within their watershed for that year, a status on all remaining risk management plans, current issues or challenges, status updates on any Section 34 amendments, and those are those amendments that are occurring due to changes in drinking water systems, new wells, replacement wells being put in, decommissioned, etc. Positive progress or news and successes or challenges of the current education and outreach efforts. Those reports were received for information. There was a summary from the project coordinator of the technical rules, which are currently being updated. There was an overview of a report regarding the new director's technical rules, which was received from the Ministry of the Environment, Conservation and Parks. Our project coordinator, Keith Taylor, had summarized how these amendments are being integrated into our source protection documents and how the local source protection plan policies will need to be amended as a result of these. This was just a status update for most of these amendments, and no decisions were made at this time. Best management practices for other systems were also discussed, with an overview of best management for systems currently outside of the Clean Water Act, which have been proposed through a document which was produced through the Ministry of the Environment, Conservation and Parks. This document, the goal of this document is to ensure that there is safe and clean drinking water for everybody in Ontario, and it outlined best management practices for both groundwater and surface water sources. The project coordinator had expressed an interest in potentially developing some pilot projects within our region. However, these would solely depend on future funding. There was some work made on the remaining policy decisions. A summary was provided on the status of the remaining policies that are contained within the Section 36 work plan. And these changes will be resulting from the director's technical rules, which were approved in late December of 2021. There was a discussion on the road salt storage policies. Currently, local municipal working groups are meeting to discuss and provide feedback on these proposed policies. And the Ministry of the Environment, Conservation and Parks Liaison Officer, Mary Wooding, had informed the committee that the ministry is currently developing a guidance document after meeting with a variety of stakeholders to get a better understanding of the challenges which are being faced with respect to this threat. Dense non-aqueous phase liquids were discussed, and it was highlighted that the new director's technical rules no longer list chemicals of concern related to dense non-aqueous phase liquids, but rather a list of businesses that may contain these chemicals or liquids. And it was noted that this list of businesses may not be exclusive, and it will be very difficult to incorporate this new policy or this new challenge wording into the existing policy wording, and that feedback is required from the Ministry of the Environment, Conservation and Parks before any draft policy wording can be brought forward to the committee. And there was also a future policy discussion about snow storage, waste, and sewage. These threats, there's very many questions that the implementers across the province have with respect to this new guidance document, as these threats are contained within the new director's technical rules. And there are a list of questions that are being generated to be submitted to the Ministry of the Environment, Conservation and Parks for review. And the committee will not be approving policy wording until there is feedback received from the ministry on the direction that they would intend that these threats take. And that's the summary of our Source Protection Committee meeting.
Thanks, Jenna. Any questions for Jenna on that update? Director Singh, go ahead.
Yes, thank you. Just to say, wow, that was intense. I tried to follow as closely as I can, but because I don't deal with this every day, it's not rolling off my conceptual mind. But thank you. And I know I can always call you and I get my questions answered later. But I just want to know if, and when we talk about non-municipal source water protection, and we're looking at housing intensification, is there some overlap in that discussion, and particularly for rural areas that are looking at creating water systems for maybe more than one facility, for example, more than one house or larger facilities? Is there any discussion about how that would work? And yeah, thank you.
Thank you. Through you, Mr. Chair. Yeah, so currently with the way that source water works is that it's only under the Clean Water Act, we only have jurisdiction over municipally owned systems, so municipal drinking water systems. Usually those service more than 5 residences. They so this is what part of those guidance documents are relating to, is to applying or encouraging best management practices for some of those smaller systems, whether they service, 5 or fewer homes, whether they're community centers, any of those small drinking water systems that aren't currently subject to the Clean Water Act and the policies in the Source Protection Plan. So the ministry has begun work on that guidance document. Conservation Ontario is helping with that document. And then we as Source Protection staff are also going to be reviewing and providing feedback on that document. So we are not necessarily looking to expand the source protection program to apply to those systems, but definitely to encourage some of the same application of best management practices to some of those more, those intensified systems.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Any other questions for Jenna on that report? Can I get a motion, please, to receive the update on the Source Protection Committee activities? Need a mover and a seconder. Director Hooper, seconded by Director Sain. Anyone opposed? And that's passed. Thank you. Item 6, annual progress report. Back to you, Jenna.
Thank you. Through you, Mr. Chair. So as I gave a bit of a spoiler alert during the Source Protection Committee report, this is the summary of the Trent annual progress report. So again, it was just the amalgamation of the 4 Source Protection Authority reports that fall within the Trent Source Protection Plan, being Kawartha, Haliburton, Otonabee, Peterborough, Crow Valley, and Lower Trent. Under the Clean Water Act and the associated general regulations, there's requirements for all source protection authorities and source protection regions to complete annual progress reports by February 1st of each year, with submission to the Ministry of the Environment, Conservation and Parks by May 1st of each year. And one source protection region, or there's one annual progress report required per source protection plan. In the Trent region, we have 2 source protection plans. As I'd mentioned earlier, the Ganaraska has their own source protection plan, so they submit their own report. So this is just a high-level summary of the report. The report is also as an appendix to this agenda item. So if you were ever interested, you can go through all the finer details, but I'll just quickly summarize what's contained within it. There are two reports that are actually generated: the supplemental report, which is guided by the Ministry of the Environment, Conservation and Parks, and then a simpler public-facing pretty report that offers the information in a more digestible and generally communicable format. The source protection region has been using an online annual reporting format for the last couple of years. It's been very well received by all of our municipal implementing bodies and all of the risk management officials who input information into that system. It was developed by the Ministry of the Environment, Conservation and Parks in partnership with Conservation Ontario. And the intent is that this program will be adopted across the province for annual reporting. And each year they're bringing on a couple new source protection regions. So we were one of the first to hop on board. So it's great that we're on the leading edge of that and not playing catch up at this point. There are many policies that have to be reported on, and generally the report was given a grade of progressing well and on target, that P, progressing well and on target. As you will remember, our Kawartha Haliburton portion of the report received the same grade of progressing well and on target, which was decided at our March Source Protection Authority board meeting. And there are 2 other grades that could have been assigned. The S is satisfactory, or limited progress made is the lower grade. But fortunately for us, for I think almost every year of our annual progress reporting since 2018, we have received the grade of progressing well and on target. So for the sections that are contained within the annual progress report, the first one is related to source protection plan policies. And luckily, 100% of our policies are either implemented, in progress, or have been evaluated, and there is no further actions required. There's tables within the agenda report you'll see that contain summaries of the status of each source protection authority. Specifically for Trent, I didn't include the Ganaraska stuff in this one, but if you were curious and wanted to see Ganaraskas, I can send that off to you separately as well. So all of our source protection authorities in the Trent watershed received 100%. So that's great. We got progressing well and on target for that one. as deemed appropriate by the committee. Municipalities also, they are responsible for implementing 56 actually policies within the source protection plan. Within our 4 source protection authorities, there are 43 municipalities. 27, being 22 lower tier and 5 upper tier, contain vulnerable areas where policies apply. And there's a table contained in this agenda item that summarizes the implementation success and status of each of the municipalities within the source protection areas, relating to standard operating procedures being established, official plans and zoning bylaw policies being implemented, emergency management plans being implemented, and then an overall grade. All of our, for the municipalities, all have received a grade of progressing well and on target within each source protection authority in the Trent Watershed. Septic inspections is one of the other sections that's within this annual progress report. So under the Ontario Building Code, septic systems that are deemed to be significant drinking water threats are subject to mandatory inspection programs, which apply once every 5 years. These inspections are undertaken by either the local health unit or health department, the municipality, or in some cases, the conservation authority, depending on the body that's empowered within the principal authority. All identified septic systems were inspected within the first 5-year time frame. So they all had to be inspected at least once within the 5 years from the approval of the source protection plan. So as of November 3rd of 2019, that was the end of our first 5-year cycle. All septics were inspected by that time, and all municipalities are now in their second round of inspections. There's a summary table contained in the agenda package that shows how many septic systems have been inspected, how many need inspections, how many were inspected in this inspection period, and then what percentage complete they are. So based on where we're at in that 5-year cycle and the progress that's been made in the septic inspections, the Source Protection Committee granted the septic inspections a grade of progressing well and on target. Risk management plans are one of the final sections in this annual progress report. So risk management officials are the implementers for 39 policies within the Trent Source Protection Plan and use tools such as prohibition risk management plans or restricted land uses. There's a summary table in the agenda package that shows how many risk management plans were established during the 2021 calendar year, how many significant threats were managed, and then the number remaining of threats to be managed, and then the number of inspections on existing risk management plans that were completed. Based on this information, the Source Protection Committee granted them a grade of progressing well and on target as well. Provincial Progress, there are 5 provincial ministries that report on 27 policies contained within the Trent Source Protection Plan, 87% of which have been implemented. The remaining 13% are reported to be in progress. However, due to their wording, they will almost always be reported as in progress. And the summary table outlines the status of the completeness for each ministry, provincial ministry. The final section contained in the annual progress report is the awareness and changes in behavior. So there's 10 policies that actually use education and outreach as the tool to influence behavior and encourage voluntary adoption of best management practices. Road signage was identified as one of the key education and outreach tools in the annual Trent annual progress report, which have been installed across vulnerable areas in the Trent Source Protection region. And to date, all required drinking water protection zone signs have been installed, with 246 of them actually being installed in the Trent Source Protection Plan region. Other successful education and outreach activities include, but obviously aren't limited to, updating of fact sheets and brochures, doing direct mailouts, sending information packages to new property owners, updating information on conservation authority or municipality websites, integrating of messaging into education and outreach programs that are being delivered virtually or potentially in person as the pandemic allows, launching of multiple successful social media campaigns and advertisements in various community guides. As a result of these actions, the Source Protection Committee gave each watershed or each Source Protection Authority, a grade of progressing well and on target, which led to the overall grade for the Trent Annual Progress Report to be assigned as progressing well and on target. So what we are suggesting is that the committee endorse this annual progress report for submission by the lead source protection authority, being Lower Trent, to the Ministry of the Environment, Conservation and Parks by May 1st of 2022. That's it.
You go. Thank you. Any questions for Jen on that report? Okay, we have a motion resolved that the Trent Source Protection Plan Annual Progress Report be endorsed, that the Trent Source Protection Plan Annual Progress Report be submitted to the Lower Trent Source Protection Authority for delivery to the Ministry of Environment, Conservation and Parks as required by Section 46 of the Clean Water Act and Section 52 of Ontario Regulation 287/07. I need a mover and a seconder for that, please. Vice Chair McFadden, second by Director Dunn. Any final comments or questions other than great job, Jenna? Thank you for updating us on that. Much appreciated. I don't take no questions as a sign of no interest. You've got it covered. Yeah, it's there. There's lots of reading we did beforehand. So lots of information there. Thank you. Any final questions? I'll call the question. Anyone opposed? That's passed. Thank you. And we have no correspondence in item 7. 8, new business, we have none. Next meeting, March 23rd, 2023. And all we have left is a motion to adjourn, please. Director McFadden, seconded by Director Kennedy. Anyone opposed to adjourning? Didn't think as much. Okay, from our friends from Halliburton, thank you for joining us. Thank you again, Jenna, for that update. And if everyone else will stay on the line, we'll go back to our board meeting and finish off a few items. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, I think we're back. We've still got everybody with us. Did we lose Kathleen? I think she's coming and going as her, probably from her internet. So, okay, we'll call the meeting back to order. We are at item 11, new business. I'm going to turn it over to Mark. I know we have an invitation. I don't know if that was sent out, but I'll let Mark explain some of the thoughts we have for our next meeting, which we talked about doing in person. Go ahead, Mark.
Yep. Thank you, Mr. Chair. And maybe what we can do is I sent it out with the information this morning, but we can put it up on screen as well, just so you can see it. So I think this is pretty exciting. This is an invitation from the Mississaugas of Scugog Island First Nation for a water ceremony. So this was directed to the board and NCAO. So if we are able to participate in this, I think it'd be great. You'll see the time there and the date. The date is on May 26th. That happens to be our next board meeting. So the timing, of course, presents a little bit of a challenge. We've inquired about the length of the meeting or the celebration. It would be about 3 hours. That puts it to about 1 o'clock, which is the start time of our board meetings traditionally. So what we were looking at is, given it's such a great opportunity, is there some way that we can afford the opportunity to attend this for anyone that's interested, and maybe shift around the location of the board meeting? So that's, subject to everyone's availability, but we're looking at in person for next meeting anyway. And we're currently in the mix of just trying to figure out a possible venue if we can kind of accomplish both things at the same time. We might have to shift the meeting back a little bit to like 1:30 perhaps, or a little bit later. But we're looking at maybe using the Mississaugas of Scugog Island, some of their their boardroom, for instance. They may have an elder ceremony that occurs later, so we're just waiting to hear whether or not that's moving forward on their end. There is the option of the nearby establishment across the road, so they do have boardrooms in the Blue Heron facility. That's another option, and there is the township office as well, and they have a council chambers area. So so we're just in the midst of trying to coordinate that. You'll see there's an RSVP by May 1st, 2022. So it's coming up in about a couple of weeks or so. So we can coordinate that on everyone's behalf, and or if you want to respond directly, that's fine too. But we can act as that collector kind of response for everyone. But so with that, I guess see if there's any questions or thoughts on this, and see if there's interest as well for attending.
Thanks, Mark. If we can pull that off the screen. So that's a water ceremony celebration. Obviously, as part of the board, we're not obligated, everybody's not obligated to attend that, but we thought if some do attend, it makes sense to have our board meeting in person, to have it down in that location. So we'll firm up a location for the board meeting at that time, but I think if anybody wants to attend this ceremony as well, seems pretty cool actually. So it might be a nice chance to do both. So any questions for Mark on that? Don't really have anything firm for you, but that's kind of the plan, and we'll keep you posted as we go. But we only have another week to confirm for the ceremony, right, Mark?
Yep.
So
Yes, till May 1st. So May 1st puts it at 1 full week, and the first would be a Sunday.
yeah,
So next week, Friday.
Yeah, so if we want to attend the ceremony, I mean, but again, that's not an obligation as a board member. If you got other things going on, you can just attend the board meeting, then we'll just firm up a location for you. But we'll go from there. Director Smith, go ahead.
Yeah, thank you, Chair Latham. I think it's a good idea. I hope to attend. I'm planning to attend, and a good opportunity to see a new facility and see how it's been integrated into their system, and yeah, and I think whether we hold the board meeting at any of those 3 locations is fine with me. I'm flexible. Thank you.
I agree. I think it's a good opportunity, and just, I think it's important that this will not be a hybrid meeting. If this is an in-person meeting, you're either in person or we're not able to attend. So if we're going to go that route, we need to do it all the way. And yeah, so we can firm up that location, but for the ceremony, if anybody can get back to, I guess, Mark or Melanie, or probably Mark is the best, and he'll coordinate it for the ceremony. I don't know if you can give us some information what the ceremony entails, Mark. I don't know if you know, or if you can get some more details, but
yep.
3 hours is a long ceremony. So I just, what does it involve? What's expected of us? Is it just we're observing? Are we part of the ceremony, or are we just there sort of as guests? So I don't know if you have any information on that.
Yep. Yeah, thanks, Mr. Chair. I can say that we're invited guests to the ceremony. I'm not sure if Melanie, she's had some contact with some personnel down at the Mississaugas of Scugog Island. She may be able to provide a little bit more context, but I can't say for sure. We can certainly inquire and send those details off as well.
Yeah, Melanie, is there anything that you know more than we do at this point?
No, unfortunately, I don't have any further details than that, but I can definitely check in with Kathy to see if she can give us a little bit more on what our participation or involvement would be with the group.
Perfect. And if you can just get that out to the board, then I think that might help with any that are sort of on the fence whether they can attend or not. Just the more details, the better. So I think we're good. So thank you, Melanie. Any other questions regarding that for next board meeting? Okay, we will get back to you. Was that it for new business, Mark?
Yes, that's
okay.
it, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. Reports and updates from board members. Is there anyone on the board wishes to bring anything forward for the rest of the members? Okay. We need to go into close briefly for legal matter. Close, I need a motion. Item 13, a motion to go into what do we have to do? Do we have to, is there any? Yeah, motion to go into closed, and then we'll turn off the YouTube, obviously. Director Windover and Director McFadden. Anyone opposed to going into closed?